Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. This is my first video and I'd like to keep the intro as short as possible. I just wanted to say that I've been interested in true crime for the longest time, since I was a kid. Dateline, 48 Hours, Forensic Files, Oxygen, I ate that stuff up. And I didn't get introduced to the YouTube realm of things until quarantine, so about 6 months ago. Thanks Danielle and Kendall. But yeah. That's pretty much what my channel is going to be centered around, and sorry if I'm looking down at my notes, I'm new to this. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Mary Louise Day. Mary was born on February 19th, 1968 to Charlotte Pressler and Charles Day in Little Falls, New York. 3 years after Mary was born, she already had two little sisters named Kathy and Sherry. The girls didn't have the easiest childhood. All of them were in the foster care system at a very young age. I couldn't find much on who Mary was as a person, but according to her mom in later interviews, she supposedly ran away all the time. Anyways, while the girls were in the foster care system, their mother Charlotte ended up divorcing their dad Charles, and she got married to a man named William Huell. William and Charlotte had two kids, Billie Jean and William Jr., and after they had the two kids, Charlotte gained custody of Kathy and Mary. Sherry ended up getting adopted by their foster family. Shortly after Charlotte and William regained custody of the girls, William enlisted in the army. Another note that I forgot to mention was that Charlotte regained custody of the girls when Mary was around 7 or 8. This was in 1976. So their stepdad William enlisted in the army in 1976 and didn't get assigned to a base until 1978. When he did get assigned to a base, the whole family moved to Hawaii. This is something important to note for later on in the video, but a few months after the family moved to Hawaii, their biological dad, Charles Day, ended up passing away, and he left Kathy and Mary an inheritance. According to Kathy, whenever her and Mary would talk about this inheritance, they would use the code word Mohawk. In December of 1980, Mary was placed into protective custody because, according to law enforcement, William had been physically assaulting her. It's unclear what kind of physical assault was going on, but based on her last runaway attempt that we're going to get to in a minute, it's safe to say that he was probably beating her. So a few months into 1981, the following year, Mary was released from protective custody and was okay to go home to her family with William. At this point in time, her family all had moved to Seaside, California. One night in 1981, the family all went out to go eat dinner except for Mary. So William had a dog, and he was in love with that dog. Probably cared about it more than he cared about his own kids. So when William came home and saw that the dog was sick, he assumed that Mary had poisoned the dog, and so he beat her. And after he beat her this night, the next morning she was gone. And according to Kathy, the last time that she saw her sister, Mary had blood coming out of her mouth. So the next day, Kathy had asked Charlotte what happened to Mary, and Charlotte's response was, "Mary ran away. Don't ever talk about Mary again." Sometime later, their sister Sherry, the one that got adopted by the foster family, came over to visit, and when she got there, she asked Charlotte what happened to Mary, and she told her the same thing. Later that night in bed, Kathy told Sherry, "Shh, don't talk about Mary, we're not allowed to talk about her." Sherry was 10 years old when Mary went missing, and when she heard that we weren't allowed to talk about Mary and that she ran away, she immediately felt something was off. So when she was an adult, she filed a missing person case for her sister. The missing persons case ended up getting filed 15 years after Mary went missing in 1994. Finally, in 2002, when the Seaside police ended up getting a hold of the case, they generated a age progression photo. At this time, Mary would have been 31 years old, and they entered the photo into the National Center for Exploited and Missing Children. In 2003, a year later, Detective Joe Britannia was asked to lead the investigation. The first thing that Britannia did when he got a hold of the investigation was he took Kathy back to their childhood home, and Kathy gave Joe a tour. When they got to the backyard, Kathy pointed out a spot in the corner under the tree where her parents said that she can never play. So Britannia's captain, Steve Cerconi, decided to bring in a team of cadaver dogs to search the backyard. If you don't know what cadaver dogs are, they are dogs that are specifically trained to smell human remains. So Cerconi decided to bring in a team of 4 dogs, and they led them to the backyard, and all 4 of them had a hit in that exact spot that Kathy was not allowed to play with under the tree. They started digging, and when they started digging, they found a little girl's shoe, but they didn't find a body. So they decided to test the soil to see if there was any decomposition going on. And when they tested it, it came out that there most likely had been decomposition at some point in time. So at this time, detectives thought that this looked super suspicious, so they decided to track down Charlotte and William to do interviews. Both of them agreed. Charlotte and William both agreed to do an interview, and during Charlotte's interview, she stuck with the story that Mary had ran away, and she also said that life is full of regrets. I'm going to insert the interrogation footage here.
You know, life is full of regrets. If you go back and say, you know, if I had did this and this and this.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Okay. So, this is my problem. I didn't do a lot of things I should have, and I didn't do a lot of things I could have and would have. Now I'm stuck with consequences.
A little off-putting, but what really struck detectives as off was William's interrogation. William told detectives that he wasn't sure if he killed Mary or not, and that his wife told him that that night he had a demon inside of him.
William told me that he didn't kill Mary Day, but his wife told him that he was possessed that night and that he had a demon inside of him.
I've never heard anybody say that before.
So at this point, after finding the child's shoe, after getting all 4 dogs to hit the same spot in the backyard, after testing the soil, and after Charlotte and William's interview, they were pretty sure that they were dealing with a homicide. Then, 9 months later, during a routine traffic stop in Phoenix, Arizona, they pulled over a woman named Mary Louise Day. Britannia was shocked, to say the least, so he decided to fly out to meet Mary in person and do an interview. Mary told Britannia about some awful memories, but what really troubled him was the fact that Mary couldn't remember so many important details, such as the inheritance that her father left her, the code word Mohawk. She somehow had a very thick southern accent, and she couldn't remember many childhood details. Britannia's captain, Cerconi, wasn't convinced either that this was really Mary. He thought that it was an imposter, so he ordered a DNA test to see if she was the daughter of Charlotte, and it came back positive that she was the daughter of Charlotte. So they ended up closing the case, and Sherry invited Mary to live with her. After Mary moved in with Sherry, Sherry started having doubts that this was the real Mary. Again, she had a thick southern accent, which didn't make sense because she didn't grow up in the South, and Sherry looked through Mary's belongings and saw a bunch of magazines that were addressed to Monica Devereaux. Their other sister, Kathy, also had her doubts because Mary didn't remember the inheritance. And at this time, Mary had been struggling with drinking for a very long time, and she had to work jobs under the table and was barely making ends meet. So it didn't make sense that Mary wouldn't claim the inheritance. Fast forward to 2008, in an unrelated search, cadaver dogs hit a house in Fort Ord, which was very close to the home that Mary's family moved to after her disappearance. Detectives didn't end up looking into this finding, but that just added to the suspicion. Captain Cerconi hired a retired homicide detective, Mark Clark, to take a look into this case to get some fresh eyes on it. Clark ended up telling 48 Hours that he believed Mary was an imposter. So now there were 3 detectives working on this case who didn't believe that this was actually Mary. I feel like they could have gone about it in a better way because the detectives have called Mary and accused her of being an imposter. And she got so fed up with this that she ended up telling them that she was better off dead in their eyes because then they can just close the case, and that they don't want to admit that she's here and that they did their detective work incorrectly. But in 2017, Acting Chief of Seaside Police, Judy Velaz, took a look at this case and decided to fly out to Mary's new home to do an interview. This interview was only 90 minutes. Judy went about this interview differently than all of the other detectives on this case had before. Instead of accusing Mary of being an imposter, she asked Mary, how did you do it? How did you survive for so long under the radar? And how did you make ends meet? Something I forgot to mention while recording is why Sherry ended up finding magazines addressed to Mary as Monica Devereaux. Mary told Judy in the interview that when she ran away, she decided to fancy up her name a bit and found the last name Devereaux in a love book that she was reading. Mary ended up telling Judy that when she ran away, she found a friend named BJ and went to stay with her for about a year before taking off again. After then, she ended up washing dishes and taking jobs under the table for cash to make ends meet.
I remember her sincerely being worried about why her picture was still listed in the missing and unidentified person system. To her, she felt she was taking the place of another child that should be there.
Judy ended up getting in contact with the woman that she stayed with. Her name was Maury Kimmel, and Maury provided Judy with a photograph of Mary with BJ at around age 14 or 15 years old. This photograph pretty much closed the case. They ended up doing facial recognition from a photo of Mary when she was 13 years old compared to this new photo of her from Maury, and it came out that it was a 99.98% chance that this was the same person. So that's it. The case was closed, but her sister Sherry still had doubts that this was actually her sister, so she flew out to see her, talked to her, and after their conversation, she concluded that this was in fact 100% her sister. Unfortunately, a few months later, Mary ended up passing away of cancer and liver problems. All three detectives who has said that they didn't believe that this was the real Mary has came out and said that they are led more to the idea of Phoenix Mary being the real Mary, but that they can't shake this hunch that they have that she is an imposter. Sir Coney especially has been very vocal about his feelings, and he said that his dogs don't lie, so if it wasn't Mary who was buried in the backyard, who was it? I'm really curious as to what you guys think, so definitely leave that in the comments below, and I'd really appreciate any positive or negative feedback, and let me know of any other cases that you'd like me to cover in the comments below. Thank you. Bye.